cyberbullying and sexting. How do we respond and what can we do to prevent it? My name is Craig Rosen and I am one of the URJ's youth specialists. And I've been working with youth and for the URJ for a number of years. And I'm delighted to invite this panel of experts to join me today to share this information. I want to take some time to introduce them. With us today is Rabbi Laura Novak-Weiner, who is the Senior Consultant and the Teen Engagement Specialist. And she provides support to congregations seeking guidance in many areas of youth programming. And Laura's been with the Union since the year 2000, so she's celebrating her 10th anniversary with the URJ, working in a variety of capacities related to youth. And she has authored the Union's Sacred Choices Project. Also joining us today is Melissa Anton-Frey, who is the Director of the URJ Kutz Camp and the Associate Director of NIFTY. Melissa's been involved in youth work in various capacities with the URJ for over 20 years. Melissa builds team leadership via Jewish ethics and values and by fostering strong, meaningful Jewish communities. In addition to overseeing all aspects of the Kutz Camp, Melissa is spearheading the NIFTY strategic planning process and serves as the advisor to NIFTY's North American board. And Melissa is calling today from our Kutz Camp, our National Leadership Camp, with her dog, Maggie, by her side. And welcome, Melissa. Beth Yohe is the Associate Director of Training and Curriculum Department of the Anti-Defamation League, Education Division. Beth develops anti-bias training and curricular materials for the ADL's A World of Difference Institute, a leading provider of anti-bias education and social justice training. In her role as Associate Director, she has written program models and resources on a variety of topic areas, including cyberbullying, ally building, analyzing curriculum through a social justice lens, and facilitation. And Beth is calling us today from Denver, where she says it's very cold. Also joining us today is Scott Hirschfeld, who is the Director of Curriculum for the Anti-Defamation League, where he develops diversity and anti-bias training and curricular resources. Scott has developed several resources on bullying for ADL, including a training program for educators and administrators and lesson plan units for educators at the K-12 level. Before joining ADL, Scott was Director of Education for the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, where he developed the No Name Calling Week campaign that promotes ongoing dialogue about ways to eliminate bullying in school communities. And Scott is located in New York, where it's also very cold, apparently. That's our panel. And we want to begin by giving you a little introduction to how to use this technology, GoToWebinar. And with us today is Adam Carroll, and he'll go through a little bit how to use this technology. Adam.
Thanks, Craig. The webinar broadcast has begun with all attendees in listen-only mode. Before the presentation begins, we would like to review a few guidelines for webinar attendees. You should all see a panel in your window similar to our examples on the following slides. This control panel presents each attendee with various options related to our webinar presentation. Please familiarize yourself with this panel so your webinar experience is optimal. If the panel is getting in your way, feel free to click on the double arrows to minimize your panel and better view the presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask questions. If you'd like to be heard, you can virtually raise your hand and I will notify you and unmute you. Then you can speak your question to the group, or if you'd rather, you can always type your questions in the questions log. You have the option of choosing one of two audio modes. Use telephone or use mic and speakers. Please select a mode that works for you, but also be aware that most computers do not have a built-in microphone. So selecting the telephone for your audio mode is often the best bet. When using the telephone component, be sure to enter your audio pin, which is located in the audio pane. If you are encountering any technical issues with your webinar experience, please type those questions in the questions log and I will do my best to assist you. If you continue to have difficulty with any portion of the webinar, please contact GoToWebinar Help either by calling their helpline and selecting option 1, or by clicking on the Help option on top of your webinar panel and selecting GoToWebinar Help. Thank you for your attention and patience, and let's begin our presentation.
Thank you, Adam. And I want to begin by launching some polls here, just so we can find out a little bit about you and who is on this, this call. So let's launch our first poll, please. In what capacity do you work with teens? Please click all that apply. We'll give you a few seconds to answer. Great, let's close that poll and share the results. Seems like there are many of you who are a youth worker, youth advisors, and a number of you who are working as educators. Some clergy and lay leaders are also here joining us, and we welcome you. Great, let's launch our second poll, please. Has cyberbullying or sexting been an issue for you and or your teens in the congregation? We want to get a better idea of if it is affecting you. Take a few minutes. Answer, please. Let's close that poll. So a number of you have indicated that some of your students have been targets. There are also quite a few instigators as well, and others of you who are just really curious about our topic today. Thank you. And our third poll. Is the cyberbullying or sexting happening within your institution or outside of your congregation? And we'll close that poll, please. So mostly it's happening outside of the congregation in the public school setting, although there are instances where it's happening within the congregation itself. So it's very helpful to know, panelists, when we address this. Hopefully we'll have a better handle of how we can help our guests who are joining us today deal with some of these issues. I'd like to begin by inviting our ADL friends to give us a little bit a background, a definition of what cyberbullying is.
Great, thanks, Craig. This is Beth Yohe, as Craig said, from the Anti-Defamation League. And I think it's important to start the webinar with a definition of cyberbullying, make sure that we are all on the same page and, in terms of thinking about this. So as you can see, it says intentional and repetitive mistreatment perpetrated through the use of technology. And so in this case, we're talking about all types of information and communication technologies, cell phones, smartphones, computers, other electronic devices. And the key pieces here in terms of understanding bullying is this idea that it's intentional. So we're talking about behavior that, even if it's just a quote-unquote just a joke, is intentional. Students are doing it intentionally. And this idea that it's repetitive. In the cyberbullying world, repetitive could mean a pattern of behavior over time, or repetition in terms of multiple people viewing, forwarding a single incident, let's say a embarrassing photo, but forwarding it many, many times so that lots of people are receiving it, and the person is repeatedly being harassed as a target. So that's sort of just the overview of what cyberbullying is. I think it's also important to think about how, in some ways, that it's different than what we think of as traditional bullying or in-person bullying. First, anyone can be a bully. So in traditional bullying scenarios, face-to-face, typically it involves perpetrators who have physical power or social status that is used to intimidate and bully others. And the technological nature of cyberbullying it's remote and it's anonymous. So perpetrators don't necessarily have to have power in this traditional sense of status or physical power. And so sometimes students are involved who would not normally be perceived as bullies by school officials or by their other adult workers who are working with them. And targets of bullying, in-person bullying, often retaliate online. So those people who are targets at school may try to retaliate by being cyberbullies as a way to try to balance that out, if you will. Cyberbullying, we see that it peaks from ages 14 to 17, while traditional bullying is more prevalent in middle school and decreases as students go into high school. We're seeing cyberbullying actually peaking in high school. One of the reasons may be because younger students gain more access over time to technology, and so that may be why it's more prevalent in high schools. And then girls are involved as boys. So boys are often assumed to bully more than girls, possibly because of a failure to recognize the socially harmful behavior of typically associated with girls as bullying, like cliques or exclusion. But there's definitely evidence that girls are as actively engaged in cyberbullying as boys, if not more engaged, because of the online communication nature of it. Some other things to keep in mind in terms of the impact of cyberbullying on the target. Generally speaking, there's no physical form of cyberbullying because it's done electronically. However, cyberbullying can be equally or more distressing for these reasons. The anonymity intensifies cruelty. So the invisibility and the assumption of immunity may embolden perpetrators and increase the severity of the harassment. Invisibility lessens empathy. They don't see the reaction of their targets and not really know the impact of their actions, so less chance for empathy or a guilty conscience or a sense of self-reproach. Victimization is 24/7. There's no escaping. There's no leaving school because students are tied to their computer, their cell phones, their different electronic devices as a part of an integral part of their social lives, and also for other needs of communicating and doing schoolwork. And so it comes into their home with them. And its impact is instant and far-reaching. So cyberbullying messages can be circulated far and wide instantaneously and can't be undone. Harassment can swell rapidly and become relentless as countless and unknown others join in. And then just briefly, where does it happen? Many of the places that you would think of. Email, although we find youth today tend not to communicate by email as much as instant messaging and text messaging. In chat rooms, on websites, either websites that were designed specifically to harm someone or with other purposes in mind, social networking sites, Facebook, MySpace, etc., certainly via cell phones. Gaming sites is one that people often may not think about as much. People who are gaming through the internet often report different forms of bullying through the chat function or through excluding people from playing, and then blogs and discussion groups as well, and message boards. So that's just sort of an overview of what cyberbullying is and how we view it. And where it happens. And then another piece that's important is this is sexting. So sexting is, if you want to click, sexting is sending, receiving, or forwarding sexually suggestive emails or text messages with a nude or nearly nude, for example, topless photo. So according to a variety of studies, between 20 to 30% of youth have engaged in some kind of sexting, either sending or receiving or forwarding sexually suggestive emails or text messages with these nude photos. The way that we look at sexting, which is an issue in and of itself, young people sending nude photos of themselves, but the way that it intersects with cyberbullying is often where initially these are being exchanged between people who are in a relationship. They can then be used in a bullying way when the relationship ends or there's a fight or those kinds of things, and then it gets forwarded to other people. And so as a really tragic example, this picture that you see is Jessie Logan. And she was one of those people who sent nude pictures of herself to her boyfriend with the intent that they only be for his eyes only. But when they broke up, he forwarded the photos to other students. And before long, everyone in Jessie's high school and other teens in the area had seen the pictures. She was harassed mercilessly, called many names, in-person bullying in terms of throwing things at her. So it became both sort of in-person and cyberbullying. She was afraid to go to school and started skipping classes. And unfortunately, it escalated, and eventually, because of the bullying that occurred, she hanged herself in her bedroom in 2008.
Thank you, Beth, for giving us an overview of cyberbullying and sexting and a working definition of the two. We want to now move to our moral obligations, and what is our obligation as youth professionals and people who work with youth within the synagogue. And I want to invite Rabbi Laura Novak-Weiner to help us move through this section.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, and happy Hanukkah. I pose these questions to us because I think that it is important for us to ask them. That, we could tell from the poll that for most of us, these incidences of bullying that our youth are involved in are not happening at the synagogue itself or in our schools themselves, but I believe we have a moral obligation to support our kids, no matter where it is those incidences that are happening. So we need to really be thinking about our moral obligations when we witness it, when we see our kids, whether it's in our schools, at our youth group events, at our camps, in our homes, engaging in this behavior. We need to address it. When we hear that one of our students is a victim, we need to be there for that person and help them find a way to address it. And when we hear that one of our students is a perpetrator, we have an obligation to counsel that student away from that behavior and help them figure out other ways of addressing their whatever the issues are that they're facing, whether it's fear or lack of confidence or being a victim themselves, things like that. And when we discover that our youth have been involved in sexting either as a recipient or as a sender, I think we have an obligation to help teach our kids what it is that they're doing and why it might not be the healthiest behavior. So it's important for us to think about this. So how does this apply to synagogues? We need to think about, just like the poll said, is it happening in our congregation or not? We need to ask ourselves these questions and figure out how we can respond. So is it happening during religious school or during youth group? And how do we respond to that? Do youth at your congregations or in your institutions have access to computers when they're there, and what sort of policies might we have in place around that? Are the kids in your congregation being bullied or bullying each other on site, on the campus of the synagogue or the school? Or is it happening outside the congregation? And I think a big part of this is, how do adults in the congregation treat each other? That a big lesson is learned by our youth when they see how adults treat each other. And if the adults are bullying each other, then it's possible that the kids are learning that lesson as well. This definitely, even though it might not happen in our synagogue, it definitely applies to the synagogue. So in terms of what we might do in the synagogue to address these issues, there are a couple things that I'll suggest here now, and then we'll go into greater depth about later. But you might consider implementing a computer user agreement for usage in the synagogue. So if youth in your congregation have, have access to a the computer, then you might put together a computer user agreement. And this is a sample one that actually Beth sent in for us to look at. And you can see that there is, it's getting very big on my screen, that there's language in there about using appropriate language or inappropriate language. And that teaches our youth a lesson. So as our congregations move more and more into using technology in the classroom, you might consider adopting something like this. Okay, the next. Okay. We might also consider creating a code of conduct for your congregation, and some congregations already have this. Coming up on the screen now is a sample of the nifty Brit Kehillah Code of Conduct, and you can see that it has in it language that specifically addresses bullying and hateful behavior, and it says, I will not participate in any activities that could be deemed as hazing, sexually harassing, demeaning, or hurtful. So you might consider creating some sort of code of conduct around that. And then you might look at having conversations with your students about these topics, oftentimes just giving them the opportunity to talk about it and explore the challenges is important and educational for them, and we can connect it to relevant Jewish values and virtues, and we'll talk more about those later. We can also teach our young people, not only teenagers, but starting at very young ages, teach them social emotional skills so that they learn how to communicate with each other, they learn how to build healthy relationships, they learn about how to be resilient, and that plays an important part in the role of the synagogue and the education program and in the youth group program. You might also want to look at your adult supervision during breaks or social time when the students are at the synagogue, and make sure there is enough adult supervision and that the adults there are paying attention and watching closely what's happening and making sure that everyone is included and behaving appropriately. Of course, staff training is important. There's lots of resources out there, and Beth and Scott will say more about some of the training resources they have available. Parent education is an important opportunity. I find that a lot of the conversations I have with educators in congregations is about how do we help the parents, and I have a lot of parents who come to me and say, well, what do I do? I'm sort of stuck. And it's a big challenge for the parents, so I think offering some education for them is important. And again, look at the social environment of the congregation. What is it? How does the environment create a space that is safe and warm and welcoming for everybody and does not promote or nurture hateful speech or hurtful speech towards fellow congregants? And then finally, you might consider developing a plan for addressing bullying when it happens on site or when it happens amongst members of the congregation. And we'll have a little bit more information about that at the end as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. Now we'd like to hear from Melissa, who helped put together some resources through Nifty.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Good afternoon, everyone. Nifty has an ongoing online initiative called Living Nifty that addresses lifestyle issues that are relevant to teens and those who work with teens. Earlier this fall, we put together a Living Nifty initiative on bullying, teasing, and harassment, which you can see the URL at the top of the page. Essentially, this is a compendium of resources from teens and people who work directly with teens in order to provide different elements online, printable programmatic pieces, teach pieces, etc. Excuse me, for our teens and those who work with teens to be able to use. When you go deeper into this site, the next screen has 3 different links from that primary site, articles and resources from a variety of different sources, and there are also a significant number of video public service announcements, everything from the Ellen DeGeneres PSA, the Dan Savage It Gets Better project, as well as some videos that were done at Nifty regional events over the course of the past few weeks. And additionally, a list of helpful websites, about 40 different websites addressing all different aspects of these issues of bullying, teasing, harassment, specifically in online forums. What makes the Living Nifty initiative unique is that everything that we provide are free and accessible resources, again, for our teens and our adults who work with teens. So please, we hope that you'll continue to utilize this, and as you create your own resources within your congregations, to please feel free to send them to us so that we can continue to add these resources so that others will have access to the great things that you're doing in your congregations as well.
Great. Thank you so much. So far we've gotten an idea, a definition, working definition of cyberbullying and sexting, and we talked a little bit about ways to respond, and we actually have some actual resources that will help us with that response. I'd like to now, our next set of slides, go back with the ADL and Scott and Beth to talk about prevention. So let's move on.
Hey. Hi everybody, this is Scott Hirschfeld from the ADL, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what we can do as educators and as adults who work with youth to prevent cyberbullying from taking place. And Craig, you can go ahead and actually put the whole list. I'm not going to talk about all of them because we have a short time together, but I'm just going to highlight a few. So I think there are 8, and you can show all of those. And I'm going to highlight just a couple of these strategies, and we actually can make available to anybody who's interested a handout that has more information about all of these prevention strategies. And we have another handout on intervention strategies as well. But I'm going to start by talking about number 4, monitoring technology use, which I think is important because all of our institutions are increasingly places where young people are using technology to do their work and to communicate with one another. And I think it's really critical. Earlier, you heard and you saw a sample technology use policy, an acceptable use policy. And I think it's really important for those kinds of policies, contracts, and agreements to be in place. And it's really important to institute supervision and monitoring practices in your institution that keep relevant staff aware and informed about how technology is being used on site, and that can help them to enforce rules and policies. You don't need to be a spy, but students at your institution need to know that when they're using the technology at your site, they're not entitled to complete privacy, and that staff will routinely monitor to make sure that technology is being used in an appropriate way. I think that you can include blocking and filtering software, as many schools do, as part of your comprehensive monitoring strategy, but we can't rely solely on those tools. We also need to engage in face-to-face education and not just rely on the technology to monitor what kids are doing online. I also wanted to highlight the next strategy, encourage reporting. I think this is really critical because there's such a strong social norm amongst young people against reporting. It's taboo to, quote, tattle or snitch. And I think that we have to work really hard as adults to establish an atmosphere where young people will understand the importance of reporting, how reporting serious incidents is different than tattling, and to make them understand the importance and to create circumstances where they feel confident coming to you and reporting. So safe and confidential reporting mechanisms for cyberbullying incidents are important. Some institutions have a message when kids log on to the school or district or institutional website, a message that states the policy about bullying and cyberbullying, about using internet appropriately, and how to report abuses of technology. It's really important that there be anonymous and confidential reporting mechanisms because many youth fear retaliation. They fear they'll get blamed. There are a lot of reasons why they don't tell, and we need to make sure that they have safe ways of doing so. And also, I hear from many teens around the country that they feel that when they do report, the adults in their environment can't or don't do anything about it. So that makes it important for us to make sure we respond to reports decisively and promptly. We investigate and we make sure that youth see that there is going to be a follow-up when they do take the step to report abusive behavior. And then on this slide, the final one that I'll highlight is to select a point person. I think that the technology field is constantly changing, and many adults feel overwhelmed by the prospect of trying to keep up with everything young people are doing online. So I think it could be really useful to designate a person or a small team of people at an institution as the point person or people, or the, quote, expert on issues of cyberbullying and internet safety. And those people can try to keep up with current laws, policies, best practices, and trends regarding cyberbullying and internet safety, and can also take the lead on building relationships with relevant community members outside of your institution, especially local law enforcement officials that deal with cyber crimes. And it's important to make sure that youth know who they can go to at your institution with any concerns they have about online safety. So those are just a few prevention strategies. There's a lot more we can do, but our time today limits us to just going over those few. I also wanted to talk about how young people should respond. So even when you put a lot of preventative measures in place and you're vigilant, incidents will take place, and we need to teach youth how to protect themselves. So first of all, we want to teach youth not to respond. Sometimes youth will have their immediate reaction will be to retaliate, fight fire with fire, or sometimes they'll want to persuade the person on the other end to leave them alone or to identify who they are. And I think that just adds to a young person's feeling of helplessness, and it gives power to the perpetrator on the other end. So we tell youth not to reply at all to the cyberbullying, but to save the cyberbullying as evidence. Should it escalate and should they need to go to adults or other authorities, there often needs to be evidence of what's been going on. So take screenshots, print out, or save the emails or texts or whatever it may be. If it's disturbing to the young person, they can ask an adult to do it for them, but we tell them not to delete the evidence when they've been abused. And if they have a sense of who the perpetrator is, then we want them to share that with a trusted adult and report it right away and make sure that it gets followed up on. It's important that the offense is reported and that we really work with youth to make them understand that there isn't shame in being a target or a victim of cyberbullying, that it happens to a lot of people, that they haven't done anything wrong, and we want them to come forth and tell us and get help. So reporting is really important to service providers, to internet service providers or cell phone service providers when appropriate, to law enforcement officials when the behavior is escalated to a serious or a criminal level, to school officials, of course to parents and guardians, and in serious cases, families may want to consult an attorney and get legal advice as well. And it's important to figure out in each case who needs to be involved in the reporting process. So those are just a few of the steps. Oh, there's one more that I wanted to make sure to mention, which is to help youth learn how to protect themselves by using the tools available to them on most websites. Oftentimes we assume that young people know more than we do and know all the functions that are available to them online, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're not using blocking mechanisms, or they don't know how to change screen names or email addresses. We can work with them to get new phone numbers or email accounts when the abuse is ongoing, and we need to make sure young people understand how to use the tools available to them. One of the things I've been noticing is that in social networking sites like Facebook and ForumSpring, youth are not using privacy settings, and they're opening themselves up to a lot of abuse. So getting them to be educated and aware of those settings and to use them consistently is something that we can all do. All right, we can go on to the next slide. I think the most important thing that all of us can do with young people is to try to create a culture of kindness instead of a culture of cruelty, and to try to mobilize all of the students in a community to act as allies and to support one another and to change cultures of meanness that exist at their schools and in their communities. And we wanted to share with you two quick stories where that's happened, because in these conferences we often dwell on the tragedies and the negative side of cyberbullying, and we wanted to share two really positive examples of how a community of young people came together to say, no, we're not going to accept cruelty and meanness online. In the first slide that you see, it took place in a suburban Chicago high school where some kids created a mean-spirited Facebook page called Evanston Rats. Evanston was the name of the town. And it actually was so nasty with negative comments being posted about other students that the police became involved and looked into shutting it down. And it really was a morale killer in that school and humiliated quite a few students. So a group of students in this school decided that they would turn the cyberbullying upside down and fight the cyberbullying with kindness, and they created a site in their community called Evanston Mice, which you see here. And if you click one more time, I think the message will come up. Let's see. Yeah, there's the message that you see when you log into that site, basically affirming that this community is about affirming students, not putting them down. If you click one more time, I think you'll be able to see some of the really positive comments that young people posted. You know, John Miller is one of the best drummers in the state, Nathaniel is one of the best drummers in the state of Illinois. He's one of the most humble people I know. He's one of my greatest friends, and so on and so on. You can see on the left that after a few days, 1,300 people in the community signed on, and they were able to really take all of the power away from the bullies who created the Evanston Rats page in the first place. If we go to the next slide, this is actually, I think, my favorite example of being a cyber ally. And this slide comes from a high school in Nova Scotia where a 9th grade boy was being bullied with anti-gay epithets and threats of violence after he wore a pink polo shirt on the first day of school. Two 12th graders in the school heard about the harassment, and they decided they were going to take action against it. So they went to a local thrift store and bought 50 pink shirts. Then they emailed their classmates to enlist them in an anti-bullying campaign that they called Sea of Pink. And the next day at school, dozens of students came wearing those pink shirts from the thrift store, and hundreds of other kids showed up wearing their own pink clothes. And when the bullied student walked into school and saw all of his fellow students all wearing in pink in an act of solidarity, you can imagine how powerful a moment it was for him. Bullying and cyberbullying works because students are socially isolated, and in this case, they really just, went full force against the social isolation and made this one student feel like he was supported and part of the community. So I think this is the crux of what we really need to be doing with young people to address cyberbullying. Just real quickly, we wanted to tell you about some resources that are available from ADL should your institutions be interested in professional development or youth training programs. And ADL takes an approach that responds to cyberbullying through a combination of education, training, and political advocacy, and I'll just say a few words about each. So we can go to the next slide. First of all, we have 4 distinct training programs. The first one is a program, full day or a half-a-day program for educators, administrators, and any adults who really work with youth in different institutions that helps to build awareness among that adult community about the unique features and impact of cyberbullying and how to address it in their communities. The second program is for families. Dealing with bullying and cyberbullying is a whole community issue. Families have to be involved. There have to be consistent messages between home and school. So we have a program specifically for families, then one specifically on the legal issues for administrators of institutions who are dealing with a lot of complicated constitutional and legal issues these days around cyberbullying and First Amendment issues. And then finally, a program for middle and high school students that arm them directly with the tools to understand and address cyberbullying. If we go to the next slide, ADL has online curriculum that is downloadable. There are lessons for elementary, middle, and secondary level students that you can download for free and use in your institutions to raise awareness about cyberbullying. The lessons are developmentally appropriate. They introduce different concepts and skills at different age levels, and that's available on ADL's website if you go to adl.org in the education section. And then finally, ADL is advocating for new or stronger laws using its model bullying and cyberbullying statute and advocacy toolkit, and we've been instrumental in passing some of the nation's strongest laws in Florida, New York, Massachusetts, and just as of this week, New Jersey. If you're interested in finding out about any of ADL's training, curriculum, or policy advocacy resources, you can contact your local ADL office. This map shows you where we have offices and where you can go to get the contact information for your local office. So thanks, everybody, for your attention.
Thank you, Scott and Beth from the ADL. You guys are leaders in providing us with tools and resources for our congregations, and we really thank you. The URJ, as you saw, also had a number of resources like our Living Nifty campaign. Melissa, you're going to talk a little bit about some additional resources that we have.
I am. I would like to talk for a few minutes about a really unique initiative that Nifty moved forward during the 2005-2006 school year called Our Space. It was a partnership between the outgoing and incoming Nifty North American boards that year. What was pivotal about that year was that it was the year that Facebook changed their population from a college-only population to allowing high school students to become members of the Facebook community. One of the challenges that we found was a dichotomy in how participants of Nifty might, in some very positive ways, share information about Nifty online, and in the same social networking space, share derogatory or hurtful comments about people or their organizations, and that there was a real disconnect between there being an overall sanctity in online spaces and our needing to treat that in an ethical forum, the same way that we would hope that we would treat people in person. So what moved forward that year was a recommendation regarding maintaining Nifty's sanctity in online spaces. And essentially what came of this was a recommendation, which I believe is the next slide, that encouraged Niftyites to adopt an ethical online opportunity in terms of sharing information about themselves, in terms of sharing information about NIFTY. But really, this was also about raising awareness about issues of that this was not just a Jewish issue, that this was an issue that transcended Judaism, that leaders lead by example, and that they, as the General Board of NIFTY that year, needed to really take a stand on this issue, and that we encourage a series of Jewish values that come along with this, primarily privacy and a person's right to having their information stay private. This is really, it was very unique at the time. It was also picked up by the Associated Press and was printed in hundreds of places over the course of a short period of time, and was featured in the New York Times and on the Wall Street Journal and on MSNBC. It's been particularly helpful over the course of the past several years as we've really extrapolated this from it simply being about maintaining NIFTY's sanctity in online spaces and utilizing the programmatic resources that came out of this to help educate our NIFTYites specifically about what it means to maintain an ethical online community. And on the primary page, the slide before, there are links to the programmatic elements that are available for not only for regional programming but also 2IG programming. And as Laura mentioned earlier, the NIFTY Brit Kehillah specifically has a line that's in it that says, I will not participate in any activities that could be deemed as hazing, sexually harassing, demeaning, or hurtful. It's important to note that as a youth-led organization, the NIFTY Brit Kehillah is a document that was created by NIFTYites and supported by NIFTY staff and youth workers. That this particular piece of the Brit Kehillah was added in about 5 years ago, and that this continues to be a living, evolving document that our teams take the lead on, specifically when they see issues at hand that aren't specifically addressed in this. But this Brit Kehillah is really a mutual agreement that a participant can come and participate in our activities, and we'll provide them that incredible venue and forum to participate, and the expectation is that they will uphold these rules while participating in our programs.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Sure.
As Jewish educators, we all have the tools to respond to this issue, and we wanted to share some of the relevant Middot and values that you can use when you're responding and teaching and talking with your teams. Laura, would you help us through this?
Sure. So I did some thinking and brainstorming about if I were to create a curriculum or some lessons around this issue of bullying and cyberbullying, that I would go to this half a dozen or so Jewish Middot character measures or Jewish values. So the most popular one that people really focus on in this is Lashon Hara, that we, gossip or evil speech. But I think there's a lot more, there's a lot deeper that we can go with this in terms of these other Middot that are listed here of miyut sicha, minimizing small talk, that we don't, if you're going to say something of value, that we just don't talk, just talk for the sake of talking, and sometimes that can lead to hurtful language. Tochacha is about how do we give healthy and safe rebuke or constructive, some might say constructive critique or constructive criticism to another, and there's a way to talk to one's peers in a supportive and menschlichkeit way, and that's what tochacha is. Anava, humility. I had a really wonderful conversation a couple weeks ago, just however many month or so ago, when there were all these, when the Rutgers incident happened, when that young man committed suicide, and I was substitute teaching in a 6th grade Sunday school class, and I decided we really needed to talk about this issue of bullying, and I was handed the the textbook that the class uses, which is a book around Jewish heroes and the values each of these Jewish heroes portrays. And actually the value that popped out to me from this book was this idea of humility, and that oftentimes somebody who is a bully doesn't really have a healthy level of humility in his or her own way that they carry themselves. And it made me think of that sort of Jewish teaching that, you know, that each person should carry 2 stones in their pockets. In one pocket you carry a stone or a piece of paper that says on it, the world was created for me. Right? That teaches that we all are unique and we are special and we have a purpose here on the planet, and that we have something to contribute. And that is an important value for all of us to have, and an attitude in life for all of us to carry with us. In the other pocket you put a stone or a piece of paper that says, I am but dust and ashes, which means I'm mortal. I'm not as big as everything else. I'm not the most important thing in the world. There are other things out there that are just as significant and important. And the idea is that if somebody carries around these 2 reminders with themselves on a daily basis, that they somehow find themselves in the middle and create a balance in how they comport themselves and a level of humility. And this group of 6th graders really grasped onto that idea that we all have to have some humility in how we carry ourselves, and that helps us remember how we treat each other. Some others on here you can see: cleaving to friends, not embarrassing, and having courage. And that's a very important one, that, you know, the challenge of speaking up against bullying, speaking out to an adult, or standing up to somebody who you see, you know, one of your friends who you see as being bullied, and standing up for them is a very, very hard and scary thing to do. And so for us to have, each of us to have a bit of Ometz Lev and to teach that to our students is important. So this is a list that I came up with. I'm sure that there are many, many other things that we could put on this list. And many of these, there's ideas about how to teach each of these values in a wonderful resource that's called Teaching Jewish Virtues, that's published by Behrman House. And so if you don't have that book, I encourage you to get it. And you can look up some of these virtues on here and values in that book, and develop some really meaningful lessons and programming around it.
Laura, you also were the author of our curriculum, Sacred Choices. You want to share with us a few of the lessons from each of these modules that might pertain to this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Craig. So there's lessons that are relevant in each of the Sacred Choices curricula, both to the idea of cyberbullying as well as to the notion of sexting, which we haven't really talked a lot about. But I would direct you to, in the middle school module, to look at these 3 lessons, on the one on communication and assertiveness and how to sort of be a strong communicator, the one on self-control, and the one on peer pressure. All of those to get, you know, of course I'm a fan of the curriculum, but those 3 lessons can each stand on their own and help us address this issue of bullying and communicating with our peers. And then in the high school module, I would direct you to these 3 lessons. I Think I Lust You, which is about the difference between love and lust and how we navigate that. The lesson called Wrap an Eruv Around My Heart, which is about boundaries and how we set appropriate boundaries in our relationships. And the lesson RESPECT, Respect, is about how we create respect in relationships and respect in ending relationships and have healthy ends to our relationships. So I think that those if you're at all interested in exploring these issues and want some sort of off-the-shelf resources available to you, those are some lessons that are there for you. And if anybody has questions about how to implement the Sacred Choices lessons in their settings, then I'm here and available to help you with that.
Great. Thank you so much. So I want to wrap up our presentation and then open up to questions. But before I do that, I want to leave us with some plans that we should think of to prevent and address bullying, and just kind of a summary of what some of the things that you've heard. You want to create congregational policies and practices, including creating the safe and confidential reporting mechanisms that Scott talked about. You want to develop a comprehensive internet use management plan. Really important to have your technology piece covered, and that students know that the things that they write and the things that they share are not private and confidential. You want to develop an incident review investigation process. Again, if something does happen, you want to make sure that you have a clear path on how to respond and investigate. Identify school action options. So really set your policy. What's going to happen if this if you discover this? Disciplinary consequences, working with families, involving guidance counselors, rabbis, clergy, cantors, educators, bringing in law enforcement people, legal professionals, etc. You want to conduct professional development for key staff. Make sure that those who are in the congregation working with teens, teachers and clergy and lay leaders who work with teens are all participate in some professional development around this issue. Make sure you talk about it. Integrate this topic into your curriculum and your youth programs. Definitely bring it up. Conduct family and community outreach and education. Let the parents, bring in the parents and really open it up to the community as well. And always go back to it and review. Conduct evaluations and assessments of your program. Make sure that you're constantly reviewing your policies and procedures surrounding these issues. So hopefully you'll have an idea or a plan that you can put into place following this webinar. We want to take some time for some questions. We realize that we've only allotted a few more minutes, and I've asked the panelists if they can stay a little longer to address questions. So we understand if you do have to leave, we thank you for participating. But if you do want to stay and ask questions, Adam's going to share with us a little bit about how to do that.
If you'd like to go ahead and share your question with the group, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you and notify you that you've been unmuted. You can speak your question to the group, or if you'd rather, you could go ahead and type your questions in the questions log, and that question will be relayed to the panelists. We already have a raised hand, so...
Great. Before we begin, I just want to, those of you who do have to leave, this is our contact information. I'm going to leave this slide up so you have time to write this down. And also, if you want to view this webinar again, it will be archived on the URJ webpage under our webinars tab. And you can view this again. You can invite others to come in and view this with you, have a viewing party. And always contact us if you need anything further or if we can help any further. Thank you. Back to you, Adam.
All right, Barrett Har, you're unmuted. Hello?
Hi there. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I have several students who have friended me on Facebook. It's my policy that I will not friend them, but if they friend me, I accept their request. And I encourage them to use privacy settings, just like I have them in certain groups where they can't see parts of my Facebook life. But I've told them that I will not regularly go searching through their pages. However, should something pop up in my status feed of concern, I may choose to address it. And I've had several instances of students using language or things that I don't necessarily think are becoming of them, and was wondering what this group's opinion, when it's particularly sexually explicit or what have you, is in acting on it.
Great. Any panelists want to take a stab at that?
I'll take a stab at it. Of course. Hi, Barrett. It's Laura. I think that you have a right to, if something comes up in the status feed that you think is of concern from a kid, to pick up the phone and call that kid and talk to them about it, and help them maybe see why you think that it is inappropriate and what others might perceive of them when they see it. And I know just as well as you that they don't get how permanent things are on Facebook. They think that, if it's the next day, it's disappeared because other things have appeared in their Facebook pages, but everything stays. Like, there's nothing is impermanent in Facebook and online. And so their future, college application, job performance, things like that could be affected by what they put out there, and how they're perceived by their peers could be affected. So I think you have, as a mentor to them, I think you have it's an opportunity for you to talk to them.
Absolutely. Now, is the recommendation to go directly to the students? When should we alert parents and make them our partners in this? Is there any sort of suggestion on what breakdown and severity one might choose, if it's a repeat offender, things like that?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, and it depends on how well you know the student and your relationship with them. And if it is sort of a repeat offense sort of thing, then you might want to bring in the parents. I think if it's a one-time, if it's a first time and you see something inappropriate, then I think it's okay. I guess it depends on the age as well. Like, if it's a high school kid and it's somebody that you have a relationship with, that you could talk to that person individually and not bring their parents in, unless it's something where it looks like they're about to hurt somebody else or themselves. If they're, clearly you're a mandated reporter, and so I assume you are in Texas, a mandated reporter. So if it's something that has to do with their health and safety or the health and safety of somebody else, and it's imminently dangerous, then you need to bring in other authorities.
Great, thank you so much. We actually had a question that was written to us by Debbie. There is also a question log, and you can definitely type your questions in there. Debbie wrote, what are some key words and phrases youth workers and teachers can use when we see bullying happening? And I thought maybe Beth or Scott, you can help us with that?
Yeah, this is Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I tried to chime in before, but I didn't think the group could hear. Before addressing that question, I just wanted to say a quick thing about the previous question, because I think it's really important. There have been a number of cases where adults have faced some legal liability, and in extreme situations have even been fired from their positions because of events that took place when they were communicating with kids on social networking sites. So I would say that if you're going to friend some of your students or the youth that you work with in a professional capacity, you should make sure that you do that with the permission of your institution rather than just as an individual decision. In other words, your institution should discuss it and have a policy about whether or not it's okay for adults to engage with students on that level. And if the institution does agree that it's okay, then you can set parameters together about what you let students know about your role, when there might be intervention or reporting to parents with certain kinds of communication. Those are all sticky rules that need to be decided together as an institution. I would really strongly recommend that you not just take it on yourself to enter into those relationships. And when you do, a lot of adults choose to have two different Facebook pages, one that's personal, that they communicate with their friends and family as an adult, and a separate one that's only for communication with the youth in their program. Because I agree, it can be a great way to interact and learn about them and communicate with them, but there may have to be some separation from your private life. So just some food for thought, because there's been some backfiring when adults, well-intentioned adults, have gotten involved on a social networking level with students. And I'm sorry I took a big divergence. I just thought that was important. Can I just ask you to repeat what the second question was?
Sure. What are some key words and phrases youth workers and teachers can use when we see bullying happening? Anyone?
Scott, are you there?
I'm here. I'm thinking on it. Do you want to? Does anybody else want to jump in?
I think this is a hard one to answer because it's so dependent on what's happening, you know, in the context of the situation. But oftentimes bullying occurs around name calling, whether it's in cyber world or face-to-face. And so I think one of the important things is to just, you know, simply question sort of, so what are you trying to say, or what do you mean by that? Because we often use slurs like gay or retarded in these negative ways, and just by a simple questioning, hey, you know, do you hear what you're saying, kind of thing, can get people to stop and think about it. Or something as simple as, could you choose another word? What, you know, if you mean if you mean you're annoyed, why don't you say that instead, or that it's foolish or whatever. But that's one idea I have.
Great.
I think also a lot of times we hear from young people that they're frustrated when adults just say, of course they're most frustrated when that kind of language and name calling goes unaddressed, but a lot of times they say adults will just say stop it or cut it out, and they won't take it to the next step. So I think that when you know, negative language is used, or bullying kinds of behavior is exhibited, teachers need to actually use it as teachers and other adults need to use it as a teachable moment to talk about what that language means, why it's unacceptable, why it's not permitted in this institution, and really educate around what was said, not just put a stop to it. So taking it to that next level and being really clear. Whatever language you use is not a particular key word, but whatever language you use to make sure you're firm in that it's unacceptable and will not be tolerated in this environment.
Great. A question came in from Jordan Magadison. Does sexting only refer to communications that involve pictures, or is suggestive language included?
So quickly, suggestive language may be part of it. Our definition of sexting really focuses on the picture piece, that they're nude or partially nude pictures. Your students may have a different definition of sexting and say that it also can just be, you know, sort of sexy texting, if you will. But when we're talking about it for legal purposes, or how we typically see negative things happen from it, we're talking about nude. The use of the pictures, the nude piece, is really our focus.
Great. And Miriam, I want to thank you for all of the things that you've been sending in, your questions, and some of the, you've been sharing some resources. Miriam is a Director of Education in Temple B'nai Shalom in New Jersey, and she has resources and some suggestions as well for us. Her email address, if you want to contact her, is meicchler@b'naishalom.com. Thank you, Miriam, for adding to the conversation through typing in. And I want to thank all of our panelists for participating in this webinar. And once again, our this webinar has been recorded and will be available for you to view. Thank you to everyone for attending, and we look forward to welcoming you back to future webinars. Bye, everybody.